If you're in Mauritius and you want to do something different, this is one of those places that's actually worth your time. I'm talking about a distillery in Chamarel. And no, this is not one of those quick tourist stops where you walk in, take a picture, and leave 5 minutes later. This is the kind of place where you slow down without even realizing it. In a world that's always moving fast, finding a place where things slow down like this is rare. Honestly, it feels like a bit of a luxury, and that is exactly what you find here. Getting there is already part of the experience. Most people stay near the coast, where the turquoise water and white sand dominate everything. But as you head toward Chamarel, the landscape begins to transform. You leave the main coastal roads, and the whole atmosphere starts to change. You start climbing, and with every turn of the road, the air gets cooler. Less traffic, more nature, more space. The air feels fresher, the light softer, filtered through the thick canopy of tropical trees. It doesn't feel like the same Mauritius most people see in brochures. The road itself is calm. No rush, no pressure. Just that feeling of going somewhere a bit more real, somewhere that hasn't been smoothed over just to please the crowds. You pass small houses, local fruit stalls, and endless stretches of green, and you realize that the journey is preparing your mind for what's to come. And when you arrive, the first thing you notice is how well everything fits into the environment. And this is where most people underestimate this place. Nothing feels out of place. It's clean but not artificial. It's designed, but it still feels natural. The architecture doesn't try to impress you. It just works. It uses warm wood, stone, and open spaces that let the breeze move through the buildings. It's not trying too hard, and that's exactly why it works so well. You walk in and straight away you can tell this isn't just built for tourists. There's a real soul to the place, a real process behind it, and an attention to detail that you just don't find in those industrial attractions. You start moving through the space, and instead of rushing from one point to another, you naturally take your time. You look around more, you notice things, the materials, the textures, the way the sunlight hits the copper of the stills. It feels intentional, but not staged, and that's something I always pay attention to. A lot of places look good on the surface, but feel empty once you're actually there. Here, it's the opposite. You can feel that something is actually happening behind what you see. There is a weight to the air here, the scent of fermenting sugar, the warmth of the machinery, the quiet focus of the people working. It's not a show, it's a job. As you go further in, you start to understand how everything works. It starts with the land. The sugarcane grows right there, nourished by the volcanic soil of the highlands. From the raw ingredients to the final product, there's a whole process that most people never really think about. And seeing it in real life makes a massive difference. It's not complicated, it's actually very clear, but it's done properly. You see the equipment, the structure, the flow of everything. You see how the cane is crushed, how the juice is extracted, and how it eventually transforms into something refined. Nothing feels rushed, nothing feels random. There's a logic to it, a rhythm that follows the earth, and even if you're not into this kind of thing, you still end up appreciating it, because it's real. It's not just there to be photographed. It exists for a reason. You're not just walking through a place anymore, you're understanding it at your own pace. One of the best parts is that you're not pushed through the experience. There are no loud tour guides, no exit through the gift shop pressure. You're free to take your time, you can stop where you want and actually look at things instead of just passing by. That is rare because most tourist spots are designed to move you quickly to maximize the volume of people. Here it's different. You can slow down, you can stay in the moment, and you start to enjoy it more because of that. You might find yourself staring at a wooden beam or watching the way the steam rises, and no one is going to tell you to move on. And then you get to the part everyone thinks is the highlight. At some point, you reach the tasting area. But honestly, it's not just about the drink. The tasting is the final chapter of a story you've been reading since you started the drive up the mountain. The tasting is good, of course. You get to try different varieties, different flavors, And it's interesting to see how each one has its own character. Some are smoother, showing the patience of the aging process. Some are stronger, carrying the raw energy of the cane. Some are more surprising than you'd expect, with notes of fruit or spice that you wouldn't normally associate with rum. And to be honest, this moment reminded me of something. When I was a kid, I remember my father and my grandfather sitting by the sea, usually late in the afternoon. Nothing fancy, just a simple glass of rum, some fried fish, and the sound of the ocean in the background. The light was always warm, almost golden, and everything felt slower, quieter. I didn't really understand it back then, but I remember the feeling, the way they took their time, the silence between words, the conversations that didn't need to go anywhere, the fact that nothing felt rushed, like time itself had decided to slow down for a while. And standing here now, it brings that back. But what makes it truly enjoyable is not just the taste itself, it's everything around it. You've seen the fields, you've seen the copper stills, you've seen how it's made. So when you finally try it, it's not just a drink. It actually connects you to the place. It's not a random liquid in a bottle, it's the result of the valley you're standing in. That makes the whole experience more complete. You're not just tasting a product, you're connecting it to the soil and to the hands that crafted it. And this is where most people think the experience ends, but it actually doesn't. Right after the tasting, there's one more thing you really shouldn't skip. Just a few steps away, there's a restaurant called L'Alchimiste. And honestly, it feels like a natural continuation of everything you've just experienced. Same atmosphere, same attention to detail, same balance between something refined, but still deeply connected to the place. You sit down and everything slows down even more. The setting is open, surrounded by nature, with that same fresh air from the hills. No rush, no noise, just a calm environment that makes you want to stay a little longer than planned. The food is simple but well thought out, built around local ingredients, and in some way, the rum always finds its place, either in the dishes or in what you're drinking alongside it. Nothing feels forced. You don't feel like you're in a tourist restaurant. You feel like you're still part of the same story. It's one of those moments where you sit back, take a breath, look around, and realize you're not in a rush anymore. And honestly, if you skip this part, you're only doing half of the experience. Another thing I love about this place is the atmosphere. It's calm but not boring. It's structured but still relaxed. There is a sense of pride in the way the place is run. You don't feel like you have to behave in a certain way or follow strict rules. You just move naturally through it, and that makes a big difference in how you remember a place. In the end, it's not just about what you see, it's about how you feel while you're there. Here, it feels easy, comfortable, and profoundly real. You feel like a guest, not just a customer. As you move outside again, maybe to the gardens or the terrace, you notice the surroundings even more. The greenery is lush, the space is wide, and the quiet is almost tangible. It's a good contrast with the busier parts of the island, the crowded beaches or the bustling markets. It reminds you that Mauritius is not just a postcard of resorts. There's a heart to this island that beats in the highlands and in the traditions of its people. Places like this are a perfect example of that. They're not hidden. Everyone knows they exist, but they're not the first thing people think about either. Maybe that's why they still feel authentic. They haven't been overexposed by social media trends yet. They haven't been turned into something artificial to fit a certain aesthetic. They've kept their identity, their grit, and their honesty, and that's what makes them worth visiting. If you're the kind of person who just wants to stay at the hotel and relax, that's fine. There is a time and place for that. But if you want to see something a bit different, something that feels more connected to the island itself, this is definitely a place you should consider. It's not about spending hours and hours here. It's about taking the time to experience it properly. Even a couple of hours is enough, but those hours feel different. They don't feel rushed, they don't feel empty, they feel well spent. you leave feeling a little bit richer. Not in money, but in understanding. And that's what matters, because at the end of the day, travel is not just about where you go, it's about what stays with you after you've returned home. It's about the memories that don't fade when you look at your photos. Places like this tend to stay with you, not because they're spectacular in an explosive way, but because they're honest. They offer a window into a way of doing things that values quality over quantity. Sometimes, that's exactly what you're looking for without even realizing it. So if you're planning a trip to Mauritius, or if you're already here sitting on a sun lounger wondering what else is out there, don't just follow the obvious path. Don't just do what the brochures tell you. Take a bit of time to explore places like this. Drive up into the hills, breathe the cooler air, and walk through the doors of a place that has nothing to hide. You might not expect much at first, it's just a distillery after all, but that's usually when you find something real. That's when you find the soul of the island. And once you experience that, you realize you are only seeing a small part of Mauritius.